Hey guys, welcome to another Photoshop tutorial with PSDBox. My name is Andrei, and in this tutorial I will show you how I made this manipulation in Photoshop. This is the first manipulation that I make, well, actually the first tutorial that I make on a Mac. So hopefully I won't have too many problems because I'm not really used to the keyboard shortcuts on a Mac yet. And the interface is a bit different, I think. I'm not sure. So I'll go a bit slower than on my previous tutorials. Hopefully I won't make it too long. Regarding the stock images that I used, I think they're all free. I made this tutorial a long time ago and I don't remember. I'll give you the links to all of them. If some of the stock images are missing, just use another one. It's not important to get exactly the same results. I want to show you how I get this effect of this underwater effect. So the texture that I use, or this divers, or the sand that you see here, are not really very important. So if you don't find the same images, just use something else, and you can find out tons of free images on the internet. So this is the image that we will get at the end of this tutorial. So let's get started. Well, this is the end result. You can see the layers palette here. There's not too many layers here, and we will use some layer styles to get the hard to look how it looks right now, but I think you can use other ways that are a lot quicker and simpler, but I'll show you that. And well, I'll close this document and start over again as I always do. I will not save it, and I will start with this stock image of the sand. I will only need part of it, and let's see the canvas size. It's too big for this tutorial. You can use the same canvas size if you want to, but let's use a smaller one. Actually, let's resize the image to 2000 pixels and constrain the proportions. Something like that. And we don't need the top part, so we will get rid of that, but first we need to unlock this background layer, because we need to create a base layer for the color of the water. So I'll press Alt and double click on this layer, unlock it, and I'll name it Sand, and I'll create a new layer below it. You can do that if you press Control or Command and click on this this icon here to get a new layer below the layer that you have selected, and I'll name this base color. And actually you can use well, let's do that. You can use a solid color, because that way you can change the color whenever you want. You can change the tone, because this will be the color of the water. And I used color. I'll give you the code. This is the color that I use. You can use a more bluish one if you want to, but I use this one. As I always say, the exact color value is not important, just to use whatever you like. So this will be our base color. Is not visible because it's under the sand. So if I deactivate this layer, you can see it now. And for the sand layer, I'll create the layer mask now. First select the layer and click this icon. And I usually use a gradient tool to mask big parts of the image like this one, but yeah, this time I'll use the same technique, and I'll use the linear gradient, this one here. Make sure the colors are set to black and white here, so that you have these colors here on top, and then select the layer mask. Just click somewhere here, because we want all this area here. So click here and just drag up. You can press the Shift key to create straight lines like that, and just let go. I have to invert the selection, so undo and reverse the gradient and do it again. Okay, something like that, but we need even less sand, so I'll start the gradient from lower. Something like that, maybe even from here. And I'll probably move it. Well, actually I should have left the image a bit bigger because I don't want this part here. But anyways, we'll create a dark area here, so this part will not even be visible. So just make sure you make this gradient right. Start from really low, something like this. I'll do it again because we only need part of the image. And if you want, you can even use the brush tool to fine tune this, to retouch the layer mask and increase the brush. Make sure you have it at hardness 0, color set to black, and you can paint like that, but the brush is too big. I'll decrease the size just a bit and undo that brush stroke so you can retouch the layer mask. I usually use low opacity so that way I can make several passes and just mask a bit more gradually. Okay, so this is our image. I'll unlock the mask because these lines here are too big, so and I need a bit more perspective. So I unlock the layer mask and select the layer itself and move it down a bit, something like that. And now I have a bit more depth, a bit more perspective. Now you can see it goes there into the distance and it looks a bit better to me. The reason why I unlocked the layer mask is because if I didn't do that, let me undo, so you can see what it does if you don't unlink the layer mask. If I move the whole image, everything moves down, including this sort of horizon here. I don't want that. I want the horizon, so to say, to still to be here, and just move the sand itself. So the layer mask stays in place, but I only move the image. Okay, now we can move on. The next thing that I did is add some levels. So I added a levels adjustment layer, and the values that I used here are 62. I just wanted to add a bit more contrast. And 1.06, so you can change the values from here. And for the highlights, 233, and that way you get a bit more contrast and a bit more color, both on the sand and on this water color here. And then in order to color the sand, because we need to blend this with this sea bottom and make it look like it's underwater, I created another fill color or solid color. The color that I used here is another similar color to the previous one, but this time I used another code. So a lighter a color that's a bit lighter than the other one. And I set the blend mode to color. Where are you? Color. Down here, set to color. And I left the opacity to 100% and the fill as well. And that way we get this color here, and we still keep the contrast from the levels. The next thing that I did is create some texture here because the water is not crystal clear, so I created a new layer and I added a bit of texture using the clouds, the rendering clouds filter. So let's name this water texture and fill this layer with white, pressing Alt and backspace. You have to make sure that you have the foreground color set to white first, otherwise you will fill it with the color that you have here. And go to filter, render, and select clouds. And there's too much white here. I will use the soft light blend mode, but I need a bit more black here, so I'll go again to filter, render, and this time I'll choose different clouds, and that way we get a bit more of black here. And you can repeat the process automatically if you press Command and F or Control F, and you will apply the filter several times. I like it like that, but something is wrong with the color, so the first thing I'll do is reset my colors and actually I'll do it again. Before you do this, after you fill this layer with white, make sure you have the color set to black and white, and then go to filter, render, and clouds. and now you can apply the difference clouds. Because the difference clouds, what it does, it kind of inverts the color, so make sure you have black and white here before you apply the clouds filter. So I'll go to render difference clouds, and this is a bit different. So this looks a lot different than this. You can see that these are red. I want them to be black and white. And I'll change the blend mode to soft light and decrease the opacity to like 10%. Those lines are too strong, so you probably want to leave this. It depends on the image. You probably want to leave it on clouds only without the rendering clouds. Yeah, it looks a lot softer. And decrease the opacity to between 5 and 10%. Let's leave it at 8 because 10 is too strong. So you can see the effect. Let me zoom in a bit. So you can see it's a very subtle texture here, just to add a bit more of interest and make it look, because this if you leave it like that, it's like too clean. And that's why I use the clouds filter. Now the next thing that I did is start working on the illumination of this scene, because as I said, I want to have this part darker and have the light coming from here, from the top right, falling on the left. You can see all these shadows here kind of fall on the left side of this. You can see the highlights here. And I want to create sort of a spotlight here and the light coming from here. And the technique that I used on the original one is not really practical. It's non-destructive, but it's not really practical, and I'll show you another technique. What I did on the original is I created a new layer, I filled it with white, changed the blend mode to multiply, and the background goes away because white and multiply means the layer becomes transparent. And then I went to filter. Well, first I changed that to smart object, but I will skip that because this is not a technique that I will show you. And then I created a spotlight like this, and maybe a bit lower, and maybe a bit bigger. And what I wanted to have is this part dark here, and some shadow here, and all the light here. And then click OK right here. And you can see that the spotlight is created here, and then you can, well, actually you cannot move it. And then drop the opacity and get the effect that you want. It looks quite nice like that, but there's another technique that's a bit quicker. Just create a new layer. Let's name this illumination. And well, actually I'll show you two techniques, so you have a lot of choice here. I want to have black. I want to fill this layer with black, so switch the foreground color to black and press Alt and Backspace to fill the layer with black, and change the blend mode of this to multiply, and then get the brush tool, increase the size. I'm using Photoshop CS6, so I can go up to 5000 pixels. Maybe something like this, a bit small. I'll make it small because then I can use the transform tool. I'll show you how, and just manipulate this. And I'll paint a single dot like that, but make sure the opacity and the flow are to 100%, and just to paint a dot like that. And you will see that I actually think I painted two. Let me undo that and do it again. Okay, and once you have that, you will start to see the image through it. And if you're wondering why I'm not using a layer mask, the reason why you see that is because I'm using the multiply blend mode, and everything that you paint with white becomes invisible on the multiply blend mode. If you don't understand it, it doesn't matter. Just paint a white dot. I mean, just fill this layer with black, paint a white dot, and now press Ctrl T or Command T to load the free transform. You'll have to zoom out a bit because now I have to transform this and just make it big like that. But I think it's quite more complicated than I thought. Just make it big like that. Probably use a bigger brush to start with, because this doesn't look really how I expected, but well, it's not looking too bad. And just to add a bit of light here, I want a bit more light on the top here. I don't want to have this part dark and this one neither, so drag it like that and make it bigger like that and place it there. And you can see that now this part becomes darker. So let me show the before and after. So you can see that now it looks a lot better. Another technique I just came up with right now, actually, using thinking about the layer masks. It's the same process, fill the layer with black, but this time create a layer mask. And on the layer mask, paint this time with black, because remember that black hides the effect. So you can do something like that. And you can use the hardness 100%, so you have more control over the edges. And just paint an area like that, maybe. Maybe this will not be as effective as the previous one, but I want to show you a technique. I mean, a feature of the layer masks, in case you didn't know. On Photoshop CS6, if you double click on a layer mask, you will open this window of the properties, and here you can change the feather of the mask. And this is just like applying blur, but it's a lot easier if you use a soft brush to start with. But you can see what you can get with this, just changing the feather, so you can get a nice effect. And if you want to adjust this, you can leave the brush at hardness 100% and just paint with black on areas that you want to hide, or with white if you want to bring back the darkness, so to say. So both techniques are useful, but I think I got a better result with this one than with this one, so I'll delete this one. So there you have 3 techniques to create this kind of illumination. So once we get this, let's move on, and we can start adding our heart here. I use the stock image, but you can use the custom shape tool that comes with Photoshop. I'm sure you'll have a heart shape here. Let me look at this one right here. Because all we need is the shape, we will use textures. So you can create a heart like this. You don't even have to worry about the color, because we will use textures, as I said. So you can create a heart like that, and then do the process that I'll show you next. But I'll stick with my stock image that I used, and it's a 3D render. Let me open it. I like the shape a bit better than the shape that comes with Photoshop. That's why I used this one. So I used this one here, the third from the left. So press Control or Command C to copy it and go back to my canvas and paste it. You can paste it below the illumination layer if you want to, or I'll paste it above it because I want to control the shadows myself for this heart individually. And press Control or Command T to load the free transform and just rotate it a bit. Actually, I'll convert this into a smart object first, and then apply, and then make the modifications to it. And now I'll change the name of this layer to heart, and flip it, turn it like that, and make it a bit smaller. Not too much, because we will mask part of it, because I want to simulate that it's buried in the sand. So something like that. I'll place it here and press enter. One thing here, make sure you don't place it too high or too low either, because that will make it look, if you put it too high, it will make it look too big, and if you drag it too low, it will make it look too small. So somewhere here, and I'll create a layer mask for it. Get the brush tool. I'll decrease the hardness to about 50%, and I'll decrease the brush size to something like this. The brush size really depends on the canvas size, but something as big as this. Select the layer mask, and I'll zoom in a bit. I'll switch the color with the X key to have the foreground color set to black, opacity and flow to 100%, mode normal. And now I'll mask the heart. Notice that I'm not using a 100%, I mean a 0% hardness, and because I want to blend it just a bit, but not too much, maybe even a bit harder. Let's leave it at 85 more or less. And don't make a straight line like that, it will not look good. Make a sort of a waving form, but not too wavy either. I think that I liked this one better. I like this one. And well, that's how you bury the heart on the sand. Maybe I'll move it just a bit, adjust the position. I don't want to copy it. Right there. And now we need to make a lot of things to this to make it look realistic. One of the things we need to do is apply the illumination to it and then apply the textures. So I'll start with the textures first. I'll create a new layer and right click on it and select create clipping mask. And you can do that a lot quicker if you press and hold the Alt key and just click between the two layers when you see that icon. And that way you create the clipping mask. Clipping masks are used in order to affect only one layer, in this case the heart. And I'll name this concrete texture. And I'll open my concrete texture, which is this one. Control or Command A, Command C to copy it, and Command W to close the document. And I'll close this one as well. And I selected this concrete texture layer and press Command or Control V to paste it. And you can see that now it's only visible on the heart itself, on the surface of the heart. That's why I used the clipping mask layer. And I'll make it smaller, this texture. I like how that crack looks there, but I want it a bit smaller. So I'll press Control T to load the free transform, lock the aspect ratio, and I'll decrease it to about 60%. And with the move tool, I'll move it on its place. I want to have this crack here because I like how it looks. It gives it a nicer feel to it. And then I'll create another layer. I'll leave this concrete texture to normal at 100%. I'll create another clipping mask layer above it, and I'll name it rust texture. As I said, if you don't find any of these textures, if they're no longer available on the internet, you can find any other texture that you have. It's not really important. So I'll select the entire canvas, copy the image, and I'll close it. Go back here and paste it on this new clipping mask layer. And of course, I'll make it smaller. I have to zoom out first. Press Control T, just like before. Lock the aspect ratio. I'll size it down to about 50%, maybe even more, to about 30%, and put it there. And I'll change the blend mode of this texture to multiply, and I'll leave this opacity at 100%. And now this looks very flat, so we'll have to add styles to it. So open the layer styles for the hard layer and go to, I used bevel and emboss. You can use other styles if you want to. I used bevel and emboss, inner bevel, and I set the depth to 123% and the size to 125, and the soften I set it to 12 pixels, and left this as it is to 30 degrees and 30 degrees. Change the highlight mode to overlay, and left the shadow mode to multiply at 75%. And if you want less shadow, you can use the slider to drop it a bit. I want to have a bit of texture visible, but I got what I want. I want the shadow here. You can change the angle if you want to, but I'll leave it like that. And then I added also some inner shadow because I want to have a highlight on this part here. Also, I left the angle to 30 degrees. Notice that I use global light. That's why on the bevel and emboss is set to 30%. So if you change the angle here, it will also change on the bevel and emboss because I have this checked. Use global light. And I changed the blend mode of this to color dodge. And let's see a color that matches this water. It needs to be a color not too bright, because if you make it too bright, it's not going to look good. Something like that, but we need to change the settings here. And I changed the distance to about 16 pixels, choke to 0, and size to about 14 pixels, just to soften that light. You can see that there. You can use any value, it's not really that important. Leave it to about 20 and change the color, make it a bit darker, something like that. You can see the effect before and after. Just add a bit of light on this right side. Okay, so now we have a bit of shape. We added a bit of shape to this heart. Let's close the layer styles. If this is too dark, you can use a levels adjustment, just add levels, but make sure you clip it to the layers below, so you can increase the lightness or the midtones or whatever you want to change of it. I'll leave it without the levels. I like how it looks already. And then I used a hue saturation adjustment also as clipping mask, because remember that we're only working on the heart now, so I don't want to affect the background. The background is okay, how it looks right now is okay. And I'll check the colorize, and I have the values here, but as I say, they're not really important. Just try to get a green tone, and for this I set this hue value to 179, and then the saturation to about 7%, and the lightness to -28. And now change the opacity of this to about 30%. Let's see how it looks. Oh yeah, now it looks a bit better. 45. It depends on the color that you get here and on the light, because if you leave it like that, it's too red, and we need to simulate that we see this through the water. So that's why we need to colorize this a bit. So maybe I'll change the hue just a bit to make it a bit greener, like that. So as you can see, the values of the original artwork don't really match this one, because it all depends on the overall image. Okay, so something like that. Now it looks a lot better, but we still need to add the shadows. In order to make these shadows realistic, we need to paint them by hand, and we need to make this two kind of shadows. First, the shadows that the heart itself casts on the side, and then some shadows here on the heart itself, especially here on this bottom part. So I'll create a new layer under the heart layer, because the shadow has to be under it. So I'll name this hard shadow. I'll get the brush tool, set hardness to 0, and the size, and I'll set the opacity and the flow to about 50%, and make a shadow like that. Well, it's not looking too nice. Well, actually, if you're not really good at painting, I'll show you a better way, an easier way to do that, because we need a sort of an oval shape here. And you can use the elliptical marquee tool like that, make a selection and fill it with black, pressing Alt and backspace. Of course, you have to make sure that the foreground color is set to black first. And now you can place this shadow right here, like that, and apply some Gaussian blur. So go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and apply a few pixels, depends on the canvas size that you have. About, let's see, 13 pixels or 15 pixels looks good in my case. It's too soft. I'll apply two kinds of blur. I'll leave this one at 10 pixels. And then I'll go back to filter, blur, but this time I'll apply motion blur. And I will change the angle slightly, because I don't want to have it, if I leave it at 0 degrees, it will make the shadow longer, like that, and I don't want that. I want to move it down a bit, so I'll change the angle slightly, like that, and reduce the distance. You can see the before and after. I think it looks a bit better now. And if you want to make it bigger, just press Ctrl T, load the free transform, make it a bit bigger and move it around. And of course, with the brush tool, with the soft brush, you can make touch-ups here, but you'll have to use a really low flow and opacity, about 15 or 20%, just to make this part, for example, a bit darker. And one thing I want to do is make what I call a contact shadow. So I'll decrease the brush size, increase the hardness to about 20 or 30%, and use opacity and flow to, let's see, about 50%. Let's leave it to about 50%, and just paint with a soft brush, with the soft part of the brush. Sorry. So I want to have a bit of shadow coming from under the heart. So that's why I'm putting the brush higher here. I don't want to do something like this. I want to just paint with the soft part of the brush. So something like that. Oops. Let's go back and do it again. Then you can increase the brush size and just do it again, but this time decrease hardness to 0. Make it a bit bigger, like so. And maybe decrease the opacity and the flow to about 20% and make a few more passes. I'll have to make sure that, okay, pen brush is not active because I'm using the pen, but you can do this with the mouse, so don't worry if you don't have a tablet. So these are the shadows. I don't really like how that one looks there. I would probably use the eraser tool and take away some of it, but at a really low opacity and flow and hardness to 0. Just take away some of that shadow. Okay, that looks better now. So this is the shadows that I made. Then, as I said, I made another set of shadows over the heart itself. So I created a new layer as a clipping mask. So just select one clipping mask and a clipping mask layer and create a new layer. And I'll name this Hard Shadow 2, and with the brush tool, low opacity and flow about 25%, hardness set to 0, just paint a few more shadows here on the top part and maybe here a bit, not too much, just a bit. It's really easy to screw this up if you don't know what you're doing, so if you think you cannot do this, it's better to leave it as it is. Just play with the styles. This part here is too dark, so I'll go to the bevel and emboss, and I'll decrease the opacity of the shadow mode. See that? And I'll leave it at about 70% because I want to see some of the texture there. That's my heart there and the shadows. You can see now it looks a lot more realistic with that shadow there. It's a lot better integrated on the scene. All we need to do now is make a spot of light here. So I'll select the top layer, on top of everything, create a new layer, and let's name this Spotlight. On the original PSD file, I didn't name the layers, so you'll have to check them if you download the PSD file. By the way, it's only available for premium members. I didn't mention that, but they're not named. So these are the names that I used for this tutorial, but the original is not named. So create this new layer, call it Spotlight. Select the brush tool, set the foreground color to white, and change the opacity and the flow of the brush to 100%, and just make a big brush like this. If you're using Photoshop CS5 or a previous version and you cannot make a brush big enough, just make it as big as you can, and then you can use the transform tool to make it bigger. And I'll just paint a spotlight like that, a spot of light, maybe even a bit higher, like so. And I'll change the blend mode to overlay, and maybe even move it higher up, like that. And if you want, you can change the opacity, but I'll leave it to 100%. Let's see the before and after. I think it makes it look a bit more dynamic that way. And the next thing we need to do is some details. I added some divers there. These are from DeviantArt, 3D renders. You can use real divers, but I couldn't find any images, So thanks to the author of this renders, they're really good. And I'll paste them here. You can tell that they are renders, you can see that they are not real, but I'll scale them down so it's not really that noticeable. The smaller you make them, the more feeling of depth you give to this. So you can say that I make it really big, it's not looking as nice as if I make it as small as this. If I make it really small, it looks like this is really down. This is really at the bottom of the ocean. So maybe even this one is too small, but anyways. And I'll open the other one. And I'll copy it, paste it on my canvas, and I'll put it side by side to the other one because I want to make it more or less the same size. Of course, you can simulate distance if you make it like a bit bigger, this one, but I want to keep it at the same size more or less, something like that. And I'll place it here. And the next thing that I'll do, let's rename this to Diver 2. And more details, let's add some bubbles here. You can search for bubble brushes on DeviantArt. I found this one, so let me see if I can just type bubble brushes, and you can see a ton of brushes here. I think I used this one, I'm not sure, but you can find a lot of brushes. I got this one, underwater realistic bubbles, PS, this one. I think, I'm not really sure, but anyways, you can get any brushes that you find. And all you need to do is, since this is really small, you don't need too many details. You can even use a normal brush, a round brush, and just play with the opacity. But I'll use this one, make it smaller. I need it really small like that. And I'll open the brushes window. And on the shape dynamics, I'll set this to pan pressure because I'm using the pan, but you can use fade and set the minimum diameter to 0 and just increase the fade, and then as you fade away these bubbles become smaller, so you can do something like that, but decrease count to 1. So just do something like that, and that way you can create these bubbles here. Change the blend mode to overlay. And as I said, you can use a normal brush and just activate the transfer option, and that way you can create random opacities. And let's do, I painted that on the diver layer. Let's create a new layer and name it bubbles. I'll paint both bubbles for both divers on the same layer. Change this to overlay and do it again, and do the same for this one, and something like that. And those are my bubbles there. And I also created some lights, so you can do that if you want to for this one, like it's holding a flashlight or something like that. And let's do that. I used the polygonal lasso tool. Let me zoom in and just make a beam of light like that, and fill it with white. Oops, with white, and apply some Gaussian blur. Not too much, something like that. And let's I would probably change this, open the hue saturation with Control or Command U and set to colorize, and decrease the lightness a bit so that you get some color here, and probably change this to a more greener light like that. Maybe change the opacity, let's see, to overlay. Looks nice. Maybe soft light. That soft light looks nice, and if you want a stronger effect, just duplicate that. And I would probably, it stops too sudden here, so I'll delete the layer and use a soft brush to delete this with the eraser tool. because I want to fade it away. I want to fade away the light. I told you I'm not too good on the Mac keyboard shortcut, so you can see I'm zooming in and out all the time. Okay, so that's how I made the lights there. Let's do the same for the other one. Let's assume that it has the flashlight on the head mounted on his helmet or wherever that thing is. Like that, and apply the Gaussian blur. And change the blend mode to soft light. And use the eraser tool to fade it away a bit. Like so. And use the colorize. If you want to apply the same settings, you can press Alt and Command U, or Alt and Control and Alt U. I think for Windows is Control and Alt. And you will open the hue saturation window with the previous settings that you used. Click OK, and I'll duplicate the layer for a stronger effect. And that's how I added my divers there. And for a final effect, if you really want to change the light again, but I think it looks nice already, you can create a stamp. It's something I always do with Shift Control Alt and E, or Shift Alt Command and E. And I'll turn this into a smart object. Go to Filter, Render, Lighting Effects, and I'll apply the Lighting Effects filter again, but a bit bigger. So I'll increase the hotspot a bit, and also make it a bit bigger, the soft light itself, and something like that. And I'll increase the ambience, which is the overall lighting, and set this to reduce the metallic to negative values because I want less contrast. And if you want more brightness on the light, you can use the gloss slider, or if you want to decrease the strength of the light itself, you can use the colorize, or if you want to give it a color, you can use this colorize color feature here. Let's click OK, and that's our image here. So the before and after the lighting effect. Notice that we have this part which is dark here, it's almost invisible. You can decrease the opacity if you want to reveal more of the background. So this was my first tutorial on a Mac. I hope you liked it, and I hope that it was not too long or too difficult to follow. So until next time, this is Andrei from psdbox.com. Thank you for watching.